Hey there, and welcome to the Traveling Homesteader and Gyroscope Farm. I'm Kathy, and today is kind of a continuation of my harvesting of honey. But we're done with honey. Thank goodness. But we still have another honey or another bee product to use. And so today's adventure is to use beeswax and to melt down some beeswax to hopefully make into another product. And today's product we're going to try to end up with is a lip balm. And so, but we got to start by melting down our beeswax. So, of course, we have our beeswax that we have from the honey process because we separated the honey from the beeswax from the hive. But then we also need some other things. Some things being like a silicone mold. I happen to have two. These two are going to be the ones that I'm going to use. Just to see how far it goes, because who knows how far this is going to go. And then I'm going to have a ladle like this. You can use something similar. It might be wise to have one a little longer, but this will do the job for what I'm doing. And then I'm also going to have a crock pot. And so this crock pot that I'm using, I just got for $5 used at Goodwill. And so by using that, it's going to help me separate out my wax from all the junkus and stuff, which then also means I need some water. I just used about a quart jar's worth of water that I pour in with the wax, the comb that I've actually already separated out. And then I'm just gonna use some, I happen to have these wooden takeout chopsticks, some, the cheapo stuff that you can get with takeout. And so I'm just going to use these. You can use something else that you can throw away. Now realize too, all these things you should only use for beeswax. Once they're used for beeswax, you probably don't want to be using chopsticks to eat your ramen noodles. That might not work out. But then the other thing I'm going to use, and I happen to do this, I got this jelly strainer set along with some bags, 2 bags. And so I'm going to use this because it has a stand. As you can see in the picture, there's this bit of a stand that you can hang the bag on over a bowl so you can strain out your jelly. In the same case, I'm going to strain out the junk from the beeswax and then have the beeswax and water go through to then sort that out separately again. But then the last thing is I need something of a container. And I decided to go with just this disposable sheet pan. And it's something I got probably at the Dollar Tree. And it happens to have a plastic lid. We don't need that. I'm just going to use the aluminum bottom. And this is going to help me capture the wax and the water that I strain out to then put back into my crock pot. And you'll see why. So come with me and check out how we might be working with beeswax to make our own clean beeswax. So now I'm taking the beeswax from the top portion of the tote and putting it into a crock pot. So essentially, I'm putting it in a crock pot and there's water down there. So I'm mixing it with water because when you put beeswax with water, the water helps take out all the junkus, and then the beeswax actually floats to the top. And so you may see that I have some other dirty comb in there. That's from another stint that I did with wax, and I just kept some wax. But essentially, this is just warming up now, and we're going to see how the wax kind of pans out. And this method it's just one of several ways you can do it. I happen to put it in a crock pot because that was kind of the cheapest way for me to go. Just got this for $5 at Goodwill today. So we're going to take, hopefully, the rest of this wax and just put it in the pot. And then I have this on high. So I'm going to let it melt down and separate out. So now the beeswax beeswax and water are kind of boiling away, and they're starting to melt down, which is really kind of neat to see. And it actually smells really good. And you can kind of see there the definition between the wax, the melted wax, and the water. So now that I've mixed it a bit with my chopsticks, you can kind of see how things are almost separating out. There's a bunch of junk up top. You can kind of see that there's just some bubbles there, and the bubbling that's going on meaning it's still hot, it's boiling. It means to me it's about that time that I'm going to start ladling this out into my jelly strainer. Now you could use something else like a thin shirt. I just happen to get the jelly stand to use the metal stand to help me as a single person doing the job, instead of having to use two hands for one thing and another hand for another thing. So that's why I got the jelly stand. But from here, our job is to start straining it out to separate kind of all the junk. So now you can see that I have a bit of a setup here. I have my melted beeswax here with the water, and it's kind of perked out. And then I have here my jelly strainer. And I will point out that this is, I kind of like it so far, but there is this neat little drawstring that probably would be wise to pull tight and tie so that you can make sure that the material doesn't fall. That would be kind of bad news. I'm just going to tie that a little snug for a minute before I get started, and then we'll get straining. So there we go. So now that that's all snug and secure, the next step is to just start scooping the water combination, the wax combination, into our strainer. Now what I'm doing is, you can kind of see, maybe even already, that there's a bunch of junk just floating around, like that was in the beeswax. So that's right now what we're getting through. So we're going to try to do this kind of quickly so that while it's still liquid, I can pour it back into my crock pot. And I'm going to do that because I want to keep it melted to then put into my silicone molds. And this is kind of just fun and easy. From just a slightly different angle so you can see how it's draining through, I ended up just putting in some wax. And as I put the wax mixture together, I then realized too, I should take my scoop here and start mixing it a little bit in there to allow more of the liquid to drain through. So as I'm getting down to the bottom of my barrel, so to speak, I'm going to have to be tilting this up to get more of the liquid better off. Since it's still warm, I'll have to kind of be careful of getting the excess. But there's still added kind of junk that I'm going to have to kind of wipe out. So I'll be wiping out my crock before I put the other wax back in, because I don't want to have too much excess. I want to try to keep my wax as clean as it can be before I get it into my molds. And again, I'll be kind of scooping this around so I get the excess liquid out of here before it goes hard. And there is a fair amount of liquid still in my strainer. Thankfully, it's coming along and it's still cooperating overall. But you can probably see there's a lot of sludge, and there is a proper term for that, and I forget what it is now. So while that's doing its thing, I'm going to try to wipe down my crock a little bit and see, that's the extra junkus that I have lining my crock. And so I'm just taking some paper towels to that, and since it's still warm, it's kind of wiping out. There. Ow. Okay, so now I'm just going to finish my handy dandy cleanup here. So now I'm just going to make sure that this gets all strained out, and then I'm going to try to quickly pour my wax liquid back into the crock so that I can then strain it into my molds. And I'm putting it back in the crock so it doesn't start to harden, because I don't want to have it in multiple spaces as it hardens. I just want to be able to put it into my molds. So now I've just put my stand on a plastic lid to help that kind of have the leakage come in a separate spot so it's easier to clean. But now I'm going to take my wax mix here and put it back into my crock pot. Just as a little side note, funny enough, as I'm working on my wax here, I've noticed that some bees from my hive have started wandering into my room where I'm working, and they're getting the scent of that's coming through the wax and all the stuff that was coming out of it. So that's something to be aware of. In case you're doing this with fresh beeswax, make sure you do it in an enclosed area where you can't have bees coming in. As it turned out, I left my door open, and that's why they're coming in here. So just FYI. So this is where we get brave, taking hot liquid and pouring it back into the crock. So we're just going to slowly but surely make sure it gets in there. And there it goes. Ta-da! And now that's all that's left. You can kind of see how the wax in the water is kind of sheeting out. So it is very much a separate liquid, but we're going to have to, and it just kind of went solid on me, which is kind of fun to see. But again, this is a pan that won't be used on anything else, just for beeswax. And you can see, this is now what our wax looks like. Well, I say wax, but it's not quite pure wax just yet, because there is still water in it that will separate out here in a moment. So just to come back to where we started with our little filter here. This, you can see, is the filter, and it's gotten rather stiff. Now, as we look inside, you can kind of see up top, the black is the dirt and junk from the bees. But then the yellow is the wax, and so it's kind of hardened up a bit. And this you can actually use for starting fires. You can do that sort of thing. And you can, if you want, actually use this to kind of rub down wood. But as you can see, it's still warm enough that it's kind of melting in my hand. But this is not usable product now other than something like a fire starter. But this is all the dirt that was collected from the hive in the wax. But there's also some little bit of excess shine, you might say, that's also honey. So there's excess honey from what I wasn't able to get out of the comb or out of the wax from the hive. So again, this is kind of what it looks like. Hopefully it'll focus. There. But this is now throwawayable. And so it's kind of done and just gone. I may try to use this as a fire starter to see if it actually works that way. That's what I understand it can be used as. But as far as the rest of this, I will more than likely, I'll try to use this again, but I may not be able to. And so I'm just going to take out the rest of what's in there. You can kind of see this is the rest or more of it. And I'll probably try to see about like kind of ironing the wax out, so to speak, to see if I can try to use this filter again. I may not be able to, and I'm okay with that. that's in part why I got the other filters in case. But as you can see, there's still kind of more stuff, and it's actually for the amount that I've taken out today of the hive, of the wax, there's a fair amount of this junk, considering that it was actually fairly clean. I suspect that most of it was from this small portion of wax that I initially got from a different frame. But as I squeeze it together, there's more liquid that comes out. And so I'll just kind of leave it all together. You can kind of see you can see down the line, there's a little bit more junkus down there, and it may just end up in the trash. And you can see this is kind of all the liquid that's left. So this is some of the water and the honey that came together. And so that's not very clean, which I'm glad that we were able to get this out. But this is kind of the end of the line junk, which, considering what we started with, that's not too bad a pile to have as waste. And granted, along the way we had a little bit, like there's a little bit of waste in there that didn't show up, but that's not too bad. And hopefully with all this excess, well, I shouldn't say all this excess, with all the wax from the hive, we'll be able to make some other good things. And that's such a cool thing about bees, is what you can use with the honey and with the wax. So now that we got this set up, we have the wax that's been strained, and it's been strained from the junk, like the hard stuffs. And now we're going to put it into these molds, which is kind of another bit of a strain because it's ultimately going to separate the water from the wax. And actually there's some honey in there as well. I'm just going to turn this up a little bit because I see it cooling off, and we don't want that just yet. So when we do this, we want to make sure that we pour it kind of quickly into our molds and then set it aside. And that's when the magic's going to happen, is that when it cools off, you can kind of see this little yellowing, it's a little different spot here. That's the wax cooling off. And that's what we're going to have, hopefully, in these molds, is that the wax will separate up and the water will be down, and I'll be able to pour the water off and have it be solid wax. Hopefully. So here we go. Let's try it out. So, in this first. So let's see, as we do this, it's already starting to cool, so it's kind of going quick. So now that this one's all filled up, you can see I kind of made a mess here, and I'll come back and kind of address that as cleanup. But you can see how it's already starting to cool off a little bit around the edges, and that's all filled up. So I'm going to come over here. You can see I started over here, and basically I'm just going to fill these molds up as well. They are rather small, so they'll be discs, and hopefully you will see a little bit of a difference in cooling time on these as well. Sorry about the little awkward viewing. A little bit of a challenge to do this right now. And so this is kind of interesting to kind of see how far the wax will go, because ultimately the separation will happen, and I don't know how much of this liquid is wax and how much is water, but I put more wax in than water, so fingers crossed it ends up being predominantly wax in each unit. Yay. Oh, and then a little bit next door. And you can see there's actually a fair amount more left in the crock pot. So we filled this mold plus this mold, and we've actually got more than I expected. You can see just since I've transferred from this silicone mold to that one, that there's actually a fair amount of cooling that's already happened. And so thankfully, this seems to be a quicker process. But it will probably take some time. It'll be some time, I'm suspecting at least an hour, before it'll actually be fully solid and I can take out of the molds. But until then, as I'm trying to get ready to clean up, I will point out something that you can do is to take something of a straight edge. I'm grabbing, actually, as we speak, my beehive tool, this handy dandy item, that you can actually just scrape up anything that you've dripped off on the counter and just simply clean it up that way. Now too, with this being a countertop, it's easier for me to kind of get that up. But remember, you may want to do this in a space that kind of doesn't matter, because it will leave scratches. So now that I've gotten my wax out of my molds, you can kind of see this is what I have left. It's not a whole lot, but it's more than I didn't know what I would expect to get. But this is kind of what we have for solidified wax from our first rendering. And right now, this is kind of my biggest piece so far. And what I want to do is remelt this to be able to put it better in the molds. As you might see in some of the pictures that I took, there was more water than wax, and so that's what made me have so much what I might call scrap. So I'm just going to remelt it down. I have my crock pot now on high again, and what I'm just going to do, and I'll admit it's struggling to open because it's so sticky. This is a bit of a process, and I probably should not have put this lid on the pot while it was all wet before. There. Thank goodness for the hive tool, because this is just what popped it open. So I just have my lid off my crock pot, and this does have the remnants of the wax from before, but I'm just going to put this little bit of water, so maybe a pint, not quite a pint of water, in the bottom, and then I'm going to have the wax go in. And remember, the wax is going to separate, it's going to melt with the water and the heat, but it's going to float to the top of the water, and all the impurities are going to hopefully go to the bottom in the water, because the water and the junkus are heavier than the wax. So once we get this all in, we're going to wait for it to melt, and hopefully this time around we'll have it melt together or get solidified in the pot, or I shouldn't say solidified in the pot, but solidified in the molds, so that it will be kind of a little bit easier to store and to work with down the line. Okay, so I will mention that while doing this process, it is sticky. Even after I've cleaned up a bit, things are still sticky. So you may want to clean up as you go, and make sure that while you're doing this, you have some sort of cleanup process, and or use gloves. I tend to not use gloves, but that may be a wise thing in this sort of process. All right, so we're back with the now melted wax. As you may be able to hear, it's kind of boiling away. So we're going to definitely turn off the heat for the time being. Basically, now we're going to take the melted wax, combine with the water, and we're going to strain it again through one of my jelly strainers. Now, I don't know if you remember from before, but we got a couple sets of these strainers that I can put in this stand to help get the extra junk out. And this will work really well for the second time to see just what extra is in there. And so as I put this in my stand, it's still the simplest thing around, I think, to have this stand. And it may be a little it may be a little bit more expensive to go this route, so I'm going to try to find if these aren't like on sale on a regular basis, because I don't know if I should throw these away or not. Usually I think they're meant to be reused, but with the wax it gets a little bit gunky. So I may try to look for something like nylons that would help, or something that's a little cheaper to make haste of. So I can maybe use these for something else. But for right now that that's all set up, I'm going to take what's in my pot and strain it through there. And in moments, we'll see the separation part. And so this is kind of like the exciting part to me, because we'll be able to kind of see how this wax is almost literally coming together. But we have to work a little bit quick, since the pan that I'm putting it into is a bit bigger than the amount of product I have to put into it. And I want to make sure that it gets into my silicone molds, which are these, with it being still warm enough. So let's see if I can put this on end and make it easier to scoop. And there's actually a lot of stuff that have come out, and it's kind of neat to see this whole process come together. And lo and behold, there's actually not that much complete junk left in the wax that we remelted. But there's enough that having this strainer is actually rather nice to have. And hopefully this time around we'll have better luck with the bricks. What I'm calling a brick, where the wax solidifies a little bit more with a little less liquid. And so we'll check it out and see. This ceramic pot's still rather hot since I just turned it off. And I'm trying to work in a way that allows me to get as much liquid as I can, because I kind of want to have as much wax as I can. Maybe I'm being a little greedy. I shouldn't be, probably. And again, there is some junk at the bottom of my strainer here, and I want to allow the liquid to flow through as much as it can. So like I said, we could have enough liquid to make it worthwhile. Okay, I think that's about as much liquid as I can get for right now out of the pot, since it is still so hot. But I'll bring my pan over, and as you can see, the liquid here below is rather nice and golden color. And so I'm gonna see about getting as much liquid out as I can. There's a little bit more coming through. Okay, it's kind of trying. It's kind of coming along. But the cool thing about this now is too, from the wax that was remainder in there from the first time we melted it, it's actually the heat of this batch is melting from before, what little was left over. And so that's kind of nice to have that as well. Let's see. Now too, I will point out, be careful with this process, because I ended up, when I did this the first time, taking some out of here, and some got on my shirt, on my other shirt that I was wearing. So you might want to be careful, and it is hot, it is warm. So you want to make sure that you're safe with this, so you don't get hurt or scalded, because that's kind of a bum deal. So now I'm going to take this and put it in my pot, just so I can get whatever excess can go back in the pot. And now I'm just going to take and put what's from my pan into my mold. And just little bit by little bit, I'll put what I can in each mold and see what happens. So now you can see how I'm putting it in the mold, and it's just coming along quite nicely. And this does seem a lot cleaner than the first time around. So it's kind of nice to see that difference. Okay, I'll admit it, I'm getting a little antsy. I'm kind of wanting to see how it turns out. I've already taken one piece out. You can see I got a little chunk here. And there's about 3/4 of that particular space was water. And that's the liquid water that's left from all the junk, rinsing all the junkus. So let's see how much this one has left us. We probably could afford to have left that, but I split it by accident. But see, even that nice is a nice little piece of wax. And get that out. And the water still is fairly warm, but again, I'm just getting excited about getting my wax. So I decided I'm going to use these chopsticks to kind of help out, to help try to push out some of the stuff. And let's see. Ooh, that's a fair amount. That's kind of a nice layer. But there's some left in there. And I started cleaning up some extra wax, and so that's what this pile is. I'm just going to put it over here. And so I'm going to maybe melt again. Who knows? We'll see. But let's try this one. That came out all nice in one piece. Again, having these silicone molds is actually kind of nice because it's allowing me to take out the wax without having to do too much damage to other stuff. But here we go. This seems to be a nice thick or thicker piece, maybe. But there we go. It's a little bit weak because it wasn't fully dry. But let's see. Yeah, I think I may have to try to melt this again and get it a little bit better. Oh. Well, let me leave that one, because that may be able to get better. Because it had some junk, I don't want to say junk, but the wax wasn't quite done all the way through. So, let's see. There. That's a little bit of a piece. And this last one, not so bad. But again, these are a little bit smaller than I was expecting, but all the same, they're really nice and clean, which is kind of nice to see. Let's try this one more time. Oh yeah, we'll let that one stay for a minute. But now it's time to try to empty the water out. I'm going to just empty the water back into this other container, or at least I'll try to. Well, that's dropping all the excess wax. But I can take the wax now, and kind of try to have it melt down in a little bit different way. So we're gonna just chat about this. Hey there. So I think when all was said and done, I got a little overzealous. I got a little excited about my wax, and so this is something that I'm actually really excited about. And I think what I'm going to do is melt it down just the wax now. And as I have my pot heating up again, I will put very little water maybe in there to help it kind of flow a little bit. But that way it won't be as much in the mold. And I think the problem is here that I have a small amount of wax that I'm trying to render down. Normally when larger beekeepers do their wax, they have a larger amount, and I've seen them put it into a 5-gallon bucket or in my draining pan. That's what they put their wax and water combination in. So it's a bit bigger area, and mine's just smaller. And so I have to learn how to put the water wax ratio a little bit better. And that way I think it'll be a bit more successful. But I'm finding that this whole process is a learning experience, and that's what I like about it. I can find ways to improve it, but I'm still excited to do it. And that's I think what I'd like to share with people is that if you can find something that, well, maybe this wasn't as successful as I'd hoped, but it's really cool because we're rendering wax, and I'm having my own beeswax from my own bees, and that to me is the really cool part about this whole process. Is that one, I'm learning about bees. Two, I'm learning about processing their extras, which is honey and beeswax, and then I'm finding a means of using even this little bit of beeswax that I've rendered out. I'm going to use some of that now in lip balm. And so that's the cool part to this whole farming thing to me. There's so many different things that we can do with our products. Some people will grow plants to help other people grow their gardens. Some people will grow plants to help feed people with their produce. I'm looking to make things with a product like beeswax. I'm looking to make lip balm or another final product. I'm looking to make other things to have as a final product to give as gifts or to sell. And that's the exciting part, is that all this wax came from my little bees that came from a neighbor whose tree fell down. And so that's the whole thing that I find really exciting. If you want to continue to see what happens on the farm, click the subscribe button down below. And why don't you leave a comment as to what you're excited to be learning about now, or what you're excited that you're growing or learning how to do. And so thanks for stopping by and going through this process with me. It's always fun to have company, and I hope to see you again soon.